Hey, my name is Gideon, and I'll be teaching a calculus-based first-year university physics course. And I'm welcoming you to come and watch this class with me. Now, most likely you are watching this because you have to take this physics class. It's maybe a requirement or a prerequisite for other things that you want to study, in which case I completely understand and I welcome you and I look forward to helping you. But I hope you can also be coming with for a second reason, and that's because you are genuinely curious about physics and how the world works. You see, most of the time when we live our life, we care about things like our friends or our family, our jobs, our earning money, or cities and governments and politics, or stories and movies and games, music, things like this. And all of these things are great. They make our lives meaningful, and it's sort of like why we live and gives us purpose to our life. But at the same time, all of these things are kind of contrived. There are things that we've created from our own imagination, and collectively we agreed to believe that they're real and important. And so they are real and they are important. But in addition to these things that we've created, this world of men, there does appear to be something else that is real, that is out there, that there's stuff going on that doesn't really care about us or what we want or what we desire or our dreams or our ambitions. It's just sort of there, doing things. And we might call this the world of nature, right? And what physics does is it's a way to study and understand nature on her own terms so that we can really get to the bottom of what's going on out there. And we live our lives with one of our feet stuck in the world of men and the other foot stuck in the world of nature. And learning physics and having a strong foundation in understanding how nature works can be incredibly powerful because it can clarify a lot of things that we try to do with our lives so that we can understand what is possible, what's not possible. And so I think there's a great motivation for you to really care about physics, even if you already are required to. So that's sort of my sales pitch there. All right, so quick introduction about myself. As I said, my name is Gideon, and I was a physics major when I went to university. I wanted to study physics precisely because of all those reasons I just gave you. Those were my true motivations. I really wanted to understand the world. And I didn't have a clear idea about what I was going to do with this degree, as far as a career or job. I didn't know where that was going. In fact, the only thing I knew was that I was not going to be a teacher. So, of course, skip a few years forward after graduation, and I find myself teaching high school science. I wound up teaching physics, biology, and chemistry at a relatively young school where I had the opportunity to build up the curriculum from basically nothing. And I discovered that I loved teaching and I loved learning. And sometimes the best way to learn is to teach. And so that's what I want to do here with you. We're going to learn and teach together. All right, now let's talk a little bit more about the course. I'm going to be using a textbook that's called University Physics by Young and Freedman, now in the 15th edition. This is a very popular textbook for first-year university physics, and you're going to find a lot of schools that use this. Now, of course, every university has the freedom to design its courses how it wants. Every professor will figure out, what they want to teach, how they're going to teach it, what order they're going to teach it in. So no two classes between different universities will be exactly the same for this first year physics. But they will be very similar because this is a very mature field. First year university physics is not changing a lot from year to year. There's not a lot of new things coming out. And so I feel very confident using this book to teach this course. In addition, I have some other motivations behind using this book. And the first is that this is the book that I used when I was studying university physics as an undergraduate. Of course, a previous edition. And the other motivation is that one of the authors of this book, Professor Young, was actually my professor. He taught me when I was studying this. And so he's since passed on, and I feel it would be a really good thing to sort of, in his memory, use his book and his materials that he used and that he created to sort of pass the torch of knowledge on to the next generation. So let's talk a little bit about how this course is going to be taught. What I'm going to be doing is I will be essentially creating a series of video lectures teaching all of the topics in this textbook from cover to cover. In addition, I'll also be creating videos where we do exercises, we do problems, and we make sure to do the math, which is very important in physics. You want to do the math. There are exercises at the end of every chapter in this textbook, and the answers to the odd-numbered questions are in the back of the book, and so that we'll be able to double check and make sure that we did the problems correctly. In addition, you can also go to my website, which is learning.withgideon.com, and you'll find all of the video lessons that I have there laid out in a very clean order, going through all of the topics. And you can click in through and you'll find all of the content that we're using here, maybe links to resources or worksheets, as well as the videos themselves. And I'm also going to be providing image files for all of the slides that I'm creating during each lesson. I use a digital sketchbook kind of blackboard with a black background to do all of my online lessons. And I prefer having a black background because it's a little bit easier on the eyes when you're staring at a screen. But I know that some people might prefer having a white background, especially if you're going to print out the slides. You waste a lot less ink with a white background. So I'll also be providing reverse contrast versions of all the slides on my website, so make sure to check it out. I also might be available for one-on-one online tutoring. If that's something you're looking for, again, go to learning.withgideon.com and you can see if I'm still available, depending on what year in the future you might be viewing these videos. But always go and check if that's something you're interested in. We can also talk a little bit about how this course is going to flow. So the textbook is broken up into different units, and they're pretty logically laid out. We start out talking about mechanics, and mechanics is where almost every single physics class begins because it teaches you the fundamental concepts of physics, things like motion, energy, forces, momentum. These concepts recur again and again all over physics, so we want to learn them in the beginning. After that, the next unit is going to be about waves. So we're talking about mechanical waves like in a rope or a string, and also sound waves in the air. And these seem sort of interesting, but maybe not super fundamental. And actually they are. They're incredibly fundamental because in general, waves are about this kind of oscillation or periodic motion where you have something that's moving and there's a restorative force trying to bring it back to equilibrium, and it overshoots and comes back, overshoots and comes back. And this kind of phenomenon of oscillation, periodic motion, this occurs almost everywhere we look. Like everything we're made of, atoms and molecules and electrons and all that stuff, they experience this kind of periodic motion. And again, you can find this kind of thing in other fields of studies, like with population dynamics and ecology, where, predators and prey, their populations swing up and down periodically through time. So developing the mathematical tools and language to talk about waves is very fundamental. So we do that fairly early on in the second unit. After that, we talk about thermodynamics, so heat and ideal gases. Then next unit is electromagnetism, so electricity, magnetism, but most importantly, we talk about fields, this concept where all of three-dimensional space is permeated by a field, this kind of mathematical construct. And so developing these ideas and tools to deal with fields, very, very important. And then we'll also talk about electrical circuits and electromagnetic radiation, which dovetails nicely into the next unit about optics, which is about light and lenses. And then finally, the last unit is modern physics, which is sort of a catch-all category where we fit in things like Einstein's relativity, quantum mechanics, and we'll also talk about things like nuclear physics, so things that don't quite fit neatly into some of the other categories before. And that's going to be pretty much the entire course. I do want to mention that there's going to be significant overlap between the university course, the university physics course here, and some other classes that high school students might be taking for college credit. I'm thinking specifically about AP classes, A-levels, and IB classes. These are sort of the three most common types of classes that high school students can take for college credit for physics. And because there's so much overlap here, my sort of grand ambition is to reuse a lot of the content that we're creating here for university physics and create additional playlists and classes for those high school for college credit type courses. While there is significant overlap, it's not 100%. In general, university physics tends to be a bit more rigorous and go more in depth with the subjects. Some of those other courses don't use calculus, for example. But some of those courses are a little bit more broad, where they might cover additional, more of applied type topics in physics that we don't cover in university physics. So I'm talking about things like global warming or electrical power generators and power grids, or medical technologies with how CAT scans and MRIs and X-rays, all those things kind of work. We don't really go too in depth in university physics about those things. And so I will try to produce additional lectures and lessons to fill in those gaps for those other courses. And I think that is pretty much all we have to say here about the introduction. So without further ado, why don't we get started and let's start learning. See you soon.